Good evening, everyone. Welcome to yet another evening of learning. It's 5 o'clock, but we would, as is the usual practice, give some few minutes for our colleagues to come in before we kick off. This is just to say happy Sunday. I hope we have had it restful so far since yesterday. I'll be back. By way of introduction, this is Adeshala, would be the moderator for today's session. And today we will be having the Nigerian Constitution and citizens' rights. So this just might be a flow off from what we had yesterday, where we talked about democracy and citizens' participation. Today we will be looking at the Nigerian Constitution and the rights of Nigerian citizens. All right. So as I mentioned earlier, we will give a few minutes for our colleagues to come in. But before we go ahead with the class, just to reiterate our class rules. Once we come into the class, please ensure that you place your names, where you are coming, where you are reaching us from, or where your location is, and the name of your party, ECN ascribed parties that we have been ascribed to for the purposes of our class works and assignments. So please make sure you put that down in the chat box even as you come in. And then also please remember that during the facilitation by our speaker today, we will encourage that we keep our questions or comments or contributions in the chat box. These questions, contributions, inputs, and all whatnot will be taken after the facilitation and the session by our speaker today. Thank you once again, and see us in a minute or two. Thank you very much. Okay, so I think we have waited enough. This is 7 past the hour of 5 p.m. Okay. Welcome once again. A big welcome to everyone. And a happy Sunday. Trust we've had it restful so far. Today we continue our learnings at the Electoral College. And today we will be looking at the Nigerian Constitution and citizens' rights. We have a facilitator, she's already in class. And we are looking to basically learn from all she has to give in terms of insights today on the Nigerian Constitution. And just like I said yesterday, it's important that we are here if we have logged on so that we can benefit and have enriching conversation this evening. It's important that we have the presence of mind so that we can take one or two things away, and this would be indeed beneficial for each and every one of us. So without wasting so much time, I would kick off by reading the profile of our facilitator this evening. Please remember to put your names in the chat box where you are dialing in from, your location, and the party that you represent at the college. Thank you. Our facilitator this evening is a legal practitioner with a key focus on technology law and regulatory compliance. She serves as a legal consultant to the foremost inter-country adoption agency in Nigeria, Life Foundation, BBC News Nigeria, and the Electoral College. She is the head legal consultant of Zoe Legal, a corporate, commercial, and startup legal advisory firm in Lagos State. She has worked with several local and international bodies on fintech, telecommunications, employment law, and immigration. In addition to her legal practice, she is very keen on public advocacy and the education of Nigerian youth on politics and governance. She serves in the Electoral College as the Deputy Director of Lagos State. She has been called to the Nigerian bar and has obtained an LLM in International Commercial Law from the University of Hertfordshire. She runs a podcast called Zoe Legal, where she speaks on legal issues and is keen on using her platform to encourage awareness and education of the masses. Ladies and gentlemen, a facilitator for this evening is none other than Uchechi. Please let's make welcome Uchechi. Okay, her surname is Zenyi Rioha. Okay, please pardon me. Just pardon me. Let me just mention Uchechi, please, with emojis in the chat box. Let's make welcome Uchechi even as she takes us on the Nigerian Constitution and citizens' rights. Uchechi, you have the floor. Thank you.
Thank you, Adeshola. Can everyone hear me, please? Am I audible?
Yes, you are. You are. They can hear you. They are not allowed to mute themselves, so they can hear you.
Okay. Okay. Thank you so much. It's so sweet to be read my profile. You have such a sweet voice. Thank you. Adeshola. All right. Good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here once again with my Electoral College fam. Fun fact, I was once in your position. I'm also a student of the Electoral College. Great work being done. Every time I come here, there's always something new. That's a pointer to the great work that Wumi and everyone has been doing, and also the ED as well. It's great to see you and everyone that is the cohorts this season. Once again, thank you so much for the introduction. As we're reading, I was like, that's a very bright person, couldn't be me. But then again, thank you again, Electoral College. It's great to be here. So I did hear Adeshola mention that you had, prior to now, that was yesterday, you had a class on democracy and citizens' participation, if I'm not mistaken, which is great. It's great that that was like a backdrop to this, because this is very much, I'm going to be speaking on your rights as citizens and what, what are the benefits, I would say, what are the benefits of being a Nigerian citizen when it comes to civic and political rights. I was going to ask a few questions, but since Adeshola said you guys are supposed to be muted, just carry on. Okay. Additional thing, project, or should I do it from my end? Can I share my screen?
Okay, you can if you're able. If not, one of the admins would help with that.
Okay.
Are you able?
Oh, let me see. Okay.
Okay, we can see your screen now.
All right. Okay. Is it visible? Is something else showing? I have a lot of things open. I prefer if someone else could me, but so it's the PowerPoint that's showing, right?
Yes.
Okay, great. Okay, without much further ado, these are the things I'm going to be talking about today. So, general overview of rights. So, what are rights? What constitutes human rights? A legal framework of citizens' rights in Nigeria. So, what are the legal frameworks? What advises or what constitutes the basics for citizens' rights in Nigeria? So we're talking about the regulatory bodies and the regulatory frameworks that govern citizens' rights. And then we'll narrow it down to civic and political rights, because obviously that's why we're here. And then we're going to touch base on the Nigerian Constitution and what it has to say about our electoral rights as Nigerians. All right, so as a general overview, the rule of law. So the rule of law is for human rights to be respected and upheld. That is just the general overview of what the rule of law is. It must be active, it must be practicable, and it must be functional. So it stipulates that everything which must be done in accordance with the law. And under the rule of law, you have ideals such as equality before the law, independence, and the autonomy of the judiciary. The importance of this separation is to ensure that everyone is indeed subject to the rule of law, right? There's no one who is more glorious or more advantaged when it comes to the law. So under the eyes of the law, everyone is equal. Ideally, everyone is equal. The law is independent, and there's autonomy of the judiciary, which is the arm of the government that the arm of the government that adjudicates on the law. Is a fundamental and prerequisite in a democratic system of government. So you only have the rule of law when you are running a democracy, right? So if you have a dictatorial system of government, or if you are talking about a communal or a communist society or a socialist society, you would not necessarily find the rule of law at play there. So the rule of law comes into play when you have a democratic society such as Nigeria. We talk about separation of powers. The law must be known and predictable. And what does that mean? It means the law must be documented. So not one person should have autonomy or foresight of what the law is. It should be put down on paper. It should be communicated to everyone. So you know, and you can predict that, okay, if person A does this, and this is the outcome, person B should also have outcome if they do that same thing, right? We must have equal application. It must be just and robust and accessible. And we must have an accessible enforcement as well. I've already mentioned independence, judiciary, and also the right to participate. Okay, so in general, that's what the rule of law talks about. It guarantees a democratic society actually is preserved. It also ensures protection of the rights of humans in a particular society. It's that everyone is under the law is supreme, and no respecter of person. So this, I'm just telling you theoretically what the rule of law is supposed to be, the people who brought it up, right? The people who curated this concept of the rule of law, this is what they had in mind. It is a major parameter in relation to performance and governance. The government must exercise its power in accordance to the law, and the citizen must not be exposed to the arbitrary whip of the leader. That means that even the people in charge are subject to the law. So someone like, well, there are different exceptions, these exceptions are also for the benefit of the society. But someone like, say, Buhari cannot wake up one day and decide to change the law. He has to go through processes. It must be vetted by either houses. It must also be brought into the house to be deliberated on. No one person or no one body or one organ of government has autonomy or superiority over the other, right? Every system or organ of government is adequately checked and balanced in a sense. So that's the concept of the rule of law. And then we flow then to rights, right? What are rights? What exactly do you understand by rights? Rights are pretty much, I would say, legal, social, or ethical principles of freedom or entitlement. So by virtue of the fact that you are a Nigerian citizen, you were born in Nigeria and probably have a Nigerian passport, there are specific ideals that you are entitled to. You can say, oh, because I'm a Nigerian, I'm capable of doing this. Because I'm a Nigerian, I have the opportunity of doing this. Now, these rights they're not a given, right? So you also have to come into that place of participating in these rights. And that's why I always say that talking about the concept of Nigerian citizens' rights, the rights of a Nigerian citizen, sometimes people always take it for granted. But you find out that people do not actually even know what it is that they're entitled to as Nigerians, and they end up changing themselves. So it's always important to educate ourselves on exactly what we are entitled to, what opportunities avail us as Nigerian citizens. They are legal. That means that they're not arbitrary, or they're not an infringement of another person's freedom, and they're also ethical principles. So obviously rights are founded on some level of morality, but not all moral concepts, get into legal rights. If you studied law and jurisprudence, you'd understand what I mean by that. So rights are more or less ethical principles of freedom or entitlement. That means that rights are the fundamental normative rules about what is allowed of a people or owed to a people according to some legal systems, social convention, or ethical theory, right? So in a federalist society like Nigeria, what you would have as rights would differ from another social system. For instance, the US, where they operate a parliamentary system, the UK, where they operate a parliamentary system, there are different sort of set of rights that occur to people in that society. All right, so I'll just move on to, actually, under rights, I'll talk about political rights as well, political and civic rights. So I think I have another slide that addresses that. Okay, so I'll just move on to the legal framework of rights in Nigeria. And by legal framework, I'm just going to narrow it down to the legal framework for political and civil rights in Nigeria. So of course, we have the Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria as amended. I would always mention the Constitution as the first body of work, or first regulatory framework, because the Constitution is known as the grand norm, the grandpa, the be all, say all. of rights in Nigeria. All rights are gleaned, all rights from all other regulatory establishments or regulatory frameworks are gleaned from the Constitution. And in law school, we were taught that if any other regulatory framework is inconsistent with the Constitution, is void or void to the extent of that inconsistency. So you would always have the Constitution as the first body of work, the first legal framework, which all other rights flow from. So we also have the electoral right, obviously. We're talking about politics, and governance. We definitely mentioned the Electoral Act. And then we have INEC regulations and guidelines for the conduct of elections. That's when you have who is eligible to vote, how can you vote, are you qualified to vote, when can you vote, things like that. So all of this body of work constitute the legal framework for the rights of the citizen. We also have other frameworks like institutions like the court system, where you can obviously go and get relief if you think that your rights have been infringed on. And various other ones. We also have international human rights obligations, regional human rights obligations as well. Now, for Nigeria, we would have to have ratified each of these instruments into our own law and constitution before we can then begin to operate them. Why I say this is that is not all of the human rights obligations, or human rights charters, or legal instruments that we have embodied. And sometimes you have that some states have codified them or ratified them, other states have not. For instance, the Child Rights Act, a lot of states in the North are yet to codify that into their body of laws. And we know why. Obviously, there's some of the provisions of the Child Rights Act are inconsistent with some native law and custom that operates there, especially when it comes to age and what a child is able to do or not do, which is also currently a debate right now. But these are some of the instances that highlight the importance of ratifying some of these international conventions into law in Nigeria. Okay, so I just took the liberty to list out some human rights instruments that deal with socio-economic issues. So we have the International Covenant on Economic and Social Cultural Rights, which we have ratified. We have some of them here I've highlighted that we're yet to ratify as well. Seeing the Convention on the Rights of the Child, we ratified that. Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women. Obviously, a woman would definitely have the right to vote here in Nigeria. Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Racial Discrimination. And we don't really talk about race here in Nigeria because the general race here is black. But then we have issues like so being biased in terms of nepotism, I would say. So in terms of where you're from, maybe you're Yoruba or Hausa, that also comes to play when talking about discrimination. So obviously in Nigeria, you have the participate in any election or participate and even put yourself up to be elected in any capacity, as long as you are a Nigerian citizen. You shouldn't be discriminated against based on perhaps the place of your birth or the conditions or circumstance of your birth. What comes to mind when I'm talking about this is the Osu caste system in some Igbo lands. I know a couple of Igbo here can relate. We think that it has phased out, but there are some villages that still practice all of those barbaric things. These are obviously against some of these conventions and should be called out when we encounter them. All right, so talking about civil and political rights. So these are a class of rights that protect individuals' freedom from infringement by the government, social organizations, and with individuals. They also ensure one's ability to participate in the civil and political life of a society or state without discrimination or repression, right? So saying that it means you have a right to vote in an election. So anything that has to do with civil or political rights in a society, any civil or political action that needs to be taken And by civil and political right, obviously that means actions that determine who comes to power, what happens with governance, what happens with your laws. Do you have a say in them? Actually quite important, because I would often hear Edie, by Edie I mean Mr. Kune, talk about that your voice as a citizen does not stop at voting in an election. There's so many other ways, there's so many other things that you have the opportunity to lend your voice and to participate in one way or the other, right? So after voting, there's a lot more other things that come to play. Determining what law governs you is also part of your rights, right? How to bring you into law, how to recall a citizen, a representative, join a political party. And also the action of a political party does not stop at when you have concluded an election. The political party is an active opposition, and there is the office of the opposition, maybe not formally, but you are there to put tension with, for lack of a better word, put tension on the lead party, call them to order, monitor them, advise them as well, be the voice, criticize them, albeit within the constraints of within the lines of the law. You are there to put pressure and ensure that these people who have taken on these leadership positions are doing what they've been called to do. And a society that I would say bring all of these things to life and actively, play out all these things, I would say is the US, right? US and UK in a way, but I think US more often than not, because they're quite liberal in their society. So they have a lot of voices here and there. It's also very interesting to watch how opposition, pressures the other party, and you can see them even also influencing change. The fact that your party won or lost doesn't mean that you've lost out on influencing government or making any change or bringing about any good to that society. You still have a role to play. You still have an active voice in that government, right? So pretty much the class of right that protects your individual freedom from infringement by government. I mean, if your voice stops at just voting in an election, also be arbitrary, because it means that whatever that government has to bring, whatever that government says, you're doomed. You don't have any sort of relief. You can't help yourself. You're just helpless. That's not what the democracy is. That does not define democracy. It's continuous. The power is always in your hands, whether or not the political party favors you or not. The power is always in the hands of people, right? Right to run for office, right to join a political party, right to participate freely in political rallies, events, or protests. So these are few of the civil and political rights that accrue to a Nigerian citizen. All right, moving on more specifically to civil rights. These are political rights that include ensuring the people's physical and mental integrity, life and safety, protection from discrimination on grounds of race. And so I mentioned that earlier, civil rights, you're protected against your gender, your origin, your color, sexual orientation, even ethnicity, religion, or disability. And these rights also ensure that you have the right to privacy, freedom of thought, conscience, speech, and expression. There's this thing going on recently, people sort of bullying people into changing their political aspirations or political inclinations. I think is also, it's quite a double standard. I mean, we are standing up for something. The majority of the youth, or is a certain segment of the society that has decided that, okay, we want a change, we want to see a change. But then if you're then bullying other people to say, oh, because you're following this person, you're going to write stuff on your Instagram page, you're going to cuss you out, it's also a bit, I don't know, it doesn't also speak well of us, because we are trying to frustrate that person away from their civic rights. I mean, everyone has the right support whatever political party they want to support. I mean, we could call them out if we have concrete evidence that perhaps they are doing it for monetary gain. But there are some people that are convinced that, whatever political party that they choose, this is where they think they should pitch their tent. Nowadays, I find that some people are a bit shy or skeptical to speak out on what political party they support because they don't want to be bullied. I think that ensuring that we have a free and fair political air or atmosphere or ambience would also really encourage people. And having that healthy debate, you put up your points, I put up my points, and if you're convinced to come on my side, good and fair. But when we turn over and start like bashing people, disrespecting people, that's not also a healthy political atmosphere to encourage. People really feel entitled to bully people out of their political or civil rights. It's not a proper way. Everyone has a civil right to support whoever they want to support. They have freedom of thoughts, conscience, speech, and expression. Because the truth is, the background of a person and perhaps the things that a person has seen through their lives informs their political, in an ideal society, informs their political society, their political inclinations. Granted that in our society, the political parties have not fully come into that. They're not. I don't think that our political parties have not fully come into that office of embodying all that a political party is supposed to be. Again, case in point, the US. You find that you just mentioned that you are a Republican. There are things that you implied without saying, right? If you mention that you are a Republican, you can suggest, okay, this is what this person is using. This is this person's religious opinion. This is this person's stand on social issues. This is this person's stand on liberalism and things like that. And if you mention that you're a liberal, from the liberal aspect of things, you can definitely just attach preconceived notions on that person. And you could be right as well. But over here, our air of politics and political party association is very yigi-yaga. People just flow. There's really no concepts. There's really no. But according to Mr. Kole, he believes that some of these political parties actually have ideologies. I think they should actually focus on being louder. If you want to build a sustainable political party system, you should really have foundational ideologies where people who want to join can, identify with. Because politics, just like can be just like religion, it can be a Bible for some people. You can really believe in it, and their children and their children's children can, align with such political ideologies. That's really how it's done in the West. Yeah. So civic rights ensure that your physical and mental integrity is preserved and protected from discrimination. Okay, moving on to political rights. So these include natural justice, procedural fairness, law. Political rights even also include the fact that for an accused person, you have a right to a fair trial. Another thing we do when there is like a scandal, you go on social media and then we've already judge the person guilty. That person also has a right to be heard. You have a right to a fair trial, due process. Even with political office holders, they have a right to due process. A bit that sometimes our judicial system can be a bit lax and not really active, with all the different bureaucracies, that aside. But really, as a political right, they have a right to seek redress or a legal remedy, right to fair trial, and also the right of participation in civil society and politics, such as freedom of association, right to assemble, right to petition, right to self-defense, and the right to vote. So all of this encapsulates what our civil and political rights as Nigerians are. That being said, as a Nigerian, you now know that, just by virtue of being born in Nigerian or having a Nigerian passport, because obviously you can be naturalized as a Nigerian. These are your rights, right? You shouldn't be, not only do you have this right, but you also have the obligation to come into these rights, right? So if you have a voter's card now, it's not active, it doesn't make any sense. It actually do not go to the voting station, cast your vote. So you might even be aware of this right, saying like, it doesn't concern me, or that one is just for these people, or things like whatever happens, or we already know who the winner is. Those are things that actively negate what accrues to you. Because the truth is, the people in power are aware of these rights. And that's why you find that some of the things that are being done are done in accordance with what the Constitution states, right? But if we dwell in our ignorance and we deny ourselves knowledge of exactly how to do things. So someone does something, or a representative that we have voted into power does something, and instead of going through the Constitution or going through the legal books or the regulatory framework to say, okay, what is my obligation, or what rights do I have, or what opportunities do I have to actually seek redress? We start, bashing on social media. Well, I mean, that works, that does something, but at the end of the day, what does the law say about seeking redress for something like this? Can I do a referendum? Can I recall that person? What's available to me, right? So it actually does us more good to be more informed. It also helps with our conversations, right? And hear people say things like, "Oh, the vice president is useless. What can he do? What is he not doing?" Okay, what really is the office of the vice president? What is the position of the vice president? What can the vice president do? So our conversations are more informed. So we're not just speaking, just because we've heard all of those things we said, or we've scrolled streaming and we had some popular person make a comment and just take that on. No, actually seek out to educate yourself on. We should actually seek out to educate ourselves on what. Sorry, am I still being heard? Michelle, can you hear me? Can everyone hear me, please?
Yes.
Okay, sorry, my internet just got interrupted. Okay, so it's really important to educate ourselves on what the law says in a particular situation, right? So instead of just, again, granted, protests are great. Protests are actually very useful, especially in a society like ours, where if you want to do anything, there has to be some level of aggression, not an aggression that goes against and then starts becoming vandalization. No, some level of grit to be put out there. But then educate yourself so that even when you're participating in this protest, you can be the voice to educate the people that are processing with that. Oh, do this, don't do this, don't go into government property, don't loiter in front of someone's private residence. Let the voices be, in a medium sort of level, because you are aware, you're better equipped to guide and educate and participate in a legal way within our political rights as a country. Okay, so I'll just move swiftly on to talk about citizens' rights as provided for in our Constitution. Now, before I delve into these rights, which I've already mentioned earlier, the question that are begging for answers, especially in our particular society, Nigeria. I would actually want to say right now that it looks really dire in Nigeria, but see that there are societies that have it worse. A society that have it worse, at least we even take us to the books of the law. We even try to even practice the Constitution sometimes, because I think the majority of issues are caused by ignorance, that we don't even know what the Constitution holds for us. If we were aware, perhaps we appreciate it more. People talk about how laws are arbitrary and that, but the truth is, have we even practiced 20% of what we've been given? Because it's quite a fairly decent book of law if you really look into it. But there are societies, talking about North Korea, if you know anything about North Korea, you know that we are heaven over here, but that doesn't mean as well that there's not a lot of work to be done, So the questions that are begging for answers is human rights respected in Nigeria? Are there avenues for redress for human rights in Nigeria? By human rights, I'm talking about Chapter 4 of the Constitution. Does the justice system have the will to treat the issue of human rights without fear or favor? Right now, I'm talking about the separation of powers. The judiciary really separates, really without influence from the other arms of government. Is the judiciary really able to act independently or without fear or favor? And does the country, as Nigeria, have institutional frameworks to tackle and deal with human rights abuses? Sometimes I'll just talk about a practical issue now, right? So I'm a lawyer, obviously, and sometimes people come to me and they're like, oh, what happened? I bought something off Instagram and this person said this and I couldn't get a refund. And honestly, person to person, I usually always just advise them to try and reason the vendor or the seller, right? Because it exhausts me as a lawyer. I get exhausted when I think about all the loops that a person has to climb before getting redress for a minor issue, right? You have things like, very recently, I just heard about the news of a doctor being hit. There was a hit and run accident in Koyi Road. And then immediately my legal sense is thinking, I'm like, okay, how can this person get redress? There are no cameras to capture who it was. How would the police even start investigating? In a sense, there's a feeling of hopelessness, like, okay, we're just all in this alone. Someone gets robbed, and then you go to the police station, and then you have to pay the police to come, and it sometimes gets overwhelming. And I'm saying this critically because I'm part of the system. First of all, identify the issues, identify the loopholes before even starting to talk about how we can move forward. So the institutional framework, there's a lot of work to be done, obviously, especially with the executive arm. Those are the ones that execute the laws, right? So we have this wonderful book of law, Constitution. What are the institutional frameworks that help to support it? What is? The Constitution is archaic, but even as it is, as archaic as it is, what institutional frameworks do we even have to tackle and grapple with human rights abuses first and foremost? And does the Nigerian government know what human rights and tenets of democracy? I feel like this question is really for the people who are vying for power positions. These are questions that we need to ask them. What are my rights? You're going there to represent, you're going there to support me, you're going there to make this country better. What do you understand by human rights, and what are the tenets of democracy in your own concept? What is your concept or ideal? What does an ideal society, democratic society look like for you? And when they tell you that, also wait, does it sound like the Nigeria that I want to live in? Does it sound like, even with the system that we have currently, does it sound far-fetched? Something that is achievable? These are questions that we can also expect to be thrown on people vying for power. These are questions that we expect to be answered by them as well. Okay, so moving on. So just talking about the various rights that we have under the 1999 Constitution. So we have the right to freedom of thought, conscience, and religion. And you can find this under section 38 of the Constitution. That explains itself. You have a right to, I was talking about how people bully people and force people to support their political party. Everyone has a right to decide on whatever they have to decide on. But the issue is, let's be rightly informed, right? Be rightly informed. Sometimes you hear people arguing that you can bring that this person is just regurgitating something that they heard somewhere. Or maybe someone spoke really confidently and it's like, I like the sound of that. Maybe I'll just adopt that for myself. No, actually doing yourself a disservice, because you as a person, you have a right to freedom of thought. So think for yourself, gather the information for yourself, make up your mind with accurate information, accurate data, research data. Nowadays we have access to unending access to information, right? So we have a right to freedom of thought, conscience, and religion. Also, we have a right to freedom of expression and the press. I love what we're doing with social media now. I think it's one thing about this new wave of social and political wokeness or awakeness. I would say that is really exciting to see, and you can see that sometimes it also has influence. It is not it's not as speedy or radical as you would want it to be. Well, you can see that people talking politics on social media and Twitter, it rattles the system a bit, and it's great to see. But I would always add, let's be informed. Let's inform ourselves. Let's proper arm ourselves with the right tools. Am I right to? I mean, what does the law say? How can, if someone like for Elliot goes to the House of Representatives or House of Assembly to say something, how can you better deal with the seller than just dragging his social media? How can you really, stand in your truth, stand in your right as a citizen, with voters' participation and voters' voting rights? How can you best do with that situation? Say by recall referendum, actually let's gather ourselves in that way and actually work to make a change, rather than just being Twitter happy. Twitter is great, but after Twitter, what next can we do? There's so much we can do. There's so much leeway or tools or opportunities that we can participate as Nigerian citizens in the political terrain of the country. Okay, just speaking on freedom of expression and the press. Yeah, so when you hear things like people being repressed about, saying something, journalism, talking about how, the regulatory body is shutting down some TV stations, that's obviously an infringement of this right, because the press is the fourth man, and they should definitely have their autonomy and voice within the society. Right to peaceful assembly and association, and this speaks to protest, right? You can protest, but peaceful is the key word. It has to be peaceful, and it has to be within the confines of the law. Yes, protest is great, and I think it's also a very key way to put our voices out there with very little aggression. Right to freedom of movement, that goes without saying. Have the right to move wherever you want to. You want to go to Khan to go and rally, to engage in political campaigns. You have the right to do that. You have the right to move anywhere. I mean, now social media, you can be at anywhere at any time, just by a click. So you have a right to freedom of movement, and you have a right to freedom from discrimination. I mean, I've already spoken on a couple of these already. So these are all codified in the Constitution as your right as a Nigerian citizen. It is there, it is written. So no one can bully you out of these rights, right? No one can, tell you, you don't have the right to participate. As long as you're within the right age, you have the right requirements, you definitely can participate. Right to acquire immovable property anywhere in Nigeria. Okay, so just moving quickly to INEC regulations and guidelines for the conduct of election. So this specifically deals with election and political participation. So according to the INEC regulations, we have a right to register to vote. So as long as you're a Nigerian citizen, you're naturalized as a Nigerian, you have a right to register to vote. And I think that this also begs for diaspora participation, and we need to bring that to light, because we have a lot of Nigerians outside of Nigeria that would also, want to execute this right. They want to participate, register to vote. I think it's something we need to lend our voices to bring that to light as well. Have a right to vote and be voted for when we register to vote. we have a right to recall an elected representative. I spoke on this earlier. Okay, I spoke on this earlier. So we have a right to recall an elected representative. So, like I said, after election, that's not the end. You still have the right to ensure that whoever you elected does, what you put there to do. So to recall means to summon back and withdraw mandate given to an elected legislator through an election. So a candidate once elected to be the Senate or House of Representatives or House of Assembly can be recalled by registered voters of the affected constituency. There's like a procedure for doing that, and something we also need to look into as well. You have a right to secrecy, privacy when voting. You mark your ballot papers and you vote in private. That's why it's always like a secluded area when you're going to vote. So no one can bully you or ask you, who did you vote for? You shouldn't always let that be known if you don't want it to be known. It's your right to keep it private. You want it to be private. So for to also avert assault or open attacks, it's supposed to be a secure area to cast your vote. You have a right to attend rallies, campaigns of political parties and candidates. So during the build-up of general elections, and in order to receive information for programs, you find political parties conducting rallies, campaigns. There's always something, one thing or the other going on. It is your right to lend your voice to your own political party of choice and participate as well. You also have a right to information about the election. You have the right to be informed about the details of the election, the dates, the time, the procedure, who are the people being contesting. It is within your right to have this information. Also, how to register and how to vote should also be something that is made public. It shouldn't just be something that is known to a select few. That's why I obviously we put it out on their websites or the info document or guidelines. This is how you should register and this is how you should do. So all of the information is yours legally. It should be yours as a right. All right, so in conclusion, the Nigerian Constitution outlined in its position fundamental human rights. So the problem, I would say, is not that the leaders do not know about the law. It's mostly a problem of implementation, in my opinion. I would want you as well to let me know what you think is the real issue here. But I think it's a problem of implementation. First, a problem of knowledge, and then a problem of implementation. So for any development to take place, government should find a way to marry democracy, rule of law, and human rights. And that anyone who is vying for power should understand what the rule of law is, and you should have an ideology around the concept of rule of law. What does the rule of law mean for you, and what does an ideal democratic system look for you? And it shouldn't be something that is so far-fetched. Like you shouldn't want Nigeria to, in a blink of an eye, become a US or a UK. It's baby steps, but first the person should have a pathway that best defines, a roadmap to achieving a proper democratic society, marrying rule of law, and seeing to it that our human rights are protected and preserved as a state. So thank you very much. I hope everyone caught one thing or two. Adeshola, over to you.
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you so much. All right, so we will take questions now. Okay, I see one hand up, Amarachi Ejogu. We'll take your question. Okay. All right. So go ahead, Amarachi.
Okay. All right. Good evening, ma'am. Good evening.
Hi, good evening.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for this class. It's really been an insightful one. And really, Electoral College, thank you so much for the opportunity you have afforded us this whole thing. And when we actually began, the ED advised that we throw away or kind of like blank our minds and just come tabula rasa, sort of politically, so we'll be able to learn. And I've done that. Please, I want to ask a question, a very layman question that have been bothering me. Please, I want to know. We've had legislative class and all that, and we were taught how laws and how things have been passed into law and all. Please, these rights and all that, how do they come about? Is it still the same process? That's one. Secondly, I used to think, or with things that have happened over time, I ask myself, how is it that some rights like child rights and all that and women rights and all, why is it not synonymous with everywhere? Why is it that some things that would happen in the north, some other regions will frown at it, but not the north will be like, no, this is how we do our own thing here, and so it should be like that. While these things happening will defile the natural man's probably health and all that, and because that's the way they do it, we just let it slide. But in other regions, it will be seen as this is wrong. This is not. This is you've just defiled the child right or woman right or something like that. How is it possible? I used to think that the law of the land supersedes religion, but I don't know. Maybe I'm mistaken. Maybe I'm just a layman that doesn't understand. So please, I want to know, number one, how are these law? How do all these rights come about? How are they passed into law? And okay, is it the same process? And secondly, why is it that some regions don't have the same thing in the same country, in the same land? You see some persons, some regions saying, no, we frown at this. Why some regions will accept it? But if you actually look at those kind of things, like why will you say, okay, marrying a 13-year-old girl is fine, is our religion and all that is okay. But another place, health-wise, you see that another region will say, no, it's not good. Health-wise and all that is not good. Why? I don't know if you understand my question. Yeah. I am a layman. I want to know. Thank you, ma.
Thank you, Amarachi. I think those are very, very great, important questions. So first of all, I'd say the Constitution probably predates us. It was made a long, long time ago. How it's typically made is that it selects people who obviously are selected by a society, right? Come together, they decide on what it is that should be laws, what it is that should guide the affairs of that state, and then they debate on it and then they sign it into law. That's just a very analogy of how a constitution is made. Now, right now, what we have are legislative arm of government. These are the people that make the laws, the ones that prepare or advise on what it is that should be in the law. So now that we already have a constitution, what would then take to the amendments, or you can even overthrow what is currently, but would be building on what has already been made, and it's done by the legislative arm of government, right? So it's the legislative arm of government that basically advises on what or curates what the law is. That is why it's very important that you're not only interested in who is president or who is governor or who is local government chairman, because the people that actually advise or actually make up the laws of the land is not the president. The president only signs it into law. It is the legislative arm of government that are the makers of the law. They're the ones that curate the bills and the ones that pass it into, they're the ones that sit on and deliberate the bill. So if you're putting up someone who knows nothing about what an ideal system should be, who has no background in political structures or governance, or has no knowledge on what, or don't even have a back story or experience on proper governance, or who their track record is less than desirable, we're actually shooting ourselves in the foot. I personally think we should be more focused or more interested in the people who make the laws. The people who make the laws are the ones who lobby for them, they're the ones who write the bills, they're the ones who present the bills, to be passed into law. So that's typically how, without going into much technicality, that's typically how a body of law is made, or a regulation or an act, comes to play. It is deliberated upon by the legislative arm of government. Now, to your second question about why, there is so much uproar about some of these inhumane things. I think I mentioned earlier that morality, some aspect of morality advises law, but not all of morality will be found in the law. And the truth about it is that morality has come to a point where it's now subjective. So what is moral for me, or what is acceptable to me, may not be acceptable to you. But as soon as it is law, as soon as it has come into law, it is then, and it has to be acceptable by me or you, because we decide to be in a particular society. We have impliedly decided that whatever that society says is law, we are going to abide by that. That's why we have, just as an instance, we have, so for instance, the same-sex marriage, we find that in the Western side of things, they've hurriedly put it into law, because of course it's a liberal society, so they've already signed it into law, because if it's acceptable and it's now legal, that means you can then not turn around and say, oh, you can't do this or that. It's the law. If it's the law, then that's what it's supposed to be guided by. Now, remember I mentioned that there's some international conventions that have been ratified by some states and not some states. You find that a lot of states, I would say, are still guided by their religious inclination. Some laws are advised by their religious inclinations. Now, if we go to the north, largely they are guided by the Sharia law. They are guided by Muslim customs and religions, and rightly so, because a large group of people in the north are Muslims. So of course they want their religiosity or their religious beliefs to flow into their laws. So some of these things have actually been codified into their laws. You have the Sharia court system, most of their native law and custom is guided by the Sharia court system. Now, under the Sharia law, a child, or under the laws in the most of the northern states, some of the northern states, let me not say most, the child is not can be taken in marriage. A child like a 12-year-old child can be taken in marriage. Now, morally, to us, it's like, what's going on? Even things like polygamy, in some places it's frowned upon, is not codified in law. So I say this to say that moral is not all of morality that translates into law or into rights, but some rights are gleaned from morality, but not all moral concepts are legal. So some parts of the North have not codified the Child's Rights Act, and the Child's Rights Act puts the child the age as 18. So if you're under 18, you're a child. So because of that, a child cannot be put in, enter into marriage, cannot enter into contracts. Anything in that nature is void or void to the extent of that contract. But in the North, they have not codified the Child's Rights Act, so they cannot then be governed by the Child's Rights Act or the Child's Rights Law, which some states have put into practice, have codified into their laws. For instance, Lagos State have codified. We even have the Lagos State Child's Rights Law. So yeah, I don't think so. There are some northern states that are yet to ratify or codify the Child's Rights Act, which properly really defines all of these things. And I would believe that it's because their laws, their religious laws or the Sharia laws are not consistent with these other laws. So it's also something of debate. A lot of people have spoken up against it because obviously, it deals on matters of morality and sensibility, to be honest. But yeah, we're still in that fight. I hope that makes sense, Amarachi.
Okay, I think it does. Brilliantly delivered. So we take Kingsley Akange, and after which we would pick out one or two questions in the chat box, and then we would wrap this up. So Kingsley, you can please unmute yourself and ask your question.
Okay, good evening, everyone. Thank you, the facilitator, for this wonderful class. My question is, there's this common saying that he that pays the piper dictates the tune. So why is it that the president has to be the one to appoint the chairperson of INEC? And if the president can appoint the chairperson of the INEC, to what degree can we truly say that INEC is independent? Why I'm asking this question is most of the times, it's very common to see that oftentimes than not, the chairperson of the INEC must come from the region where the president is from. And also, recently, we have seen cases where some persons who are known members, some who contested elections recently and lost, were appointed as resident electoral commissioners of INEC. Isn't that another result against the provisions of the Constitution? Thank you. That's my question.
All right. So I don't know if you're asking a question or if you're making a criticism of the laws. You asked why the president appoints the INEC, because it's the powers that the Constitution has given, it's the powers that the Constitution has given, the president. So the mode of appointment of the chairman, even members, is constitutionally provided, and the president, in exercising the power to appoint, appoint the chairman or members of INEC. And the Constitution mandatorily says, when you hear words like shall or must, those are mandatory, compulsory provisions. It's not subject to, or it can only be debated upon if you're trying to overhaul that position, which I think should be a subject of petition, right? So again, it goes down to who writes these laws, puts these things together. Who are we putting up there to legislate all these things, So yeah, the president, but the president appoints the chairman in consultation with the Council of State. So it's something that he just sits and decides, and he's supposed to consult them. But by and large, he is the one who makes this appointment. Also, I think a way of checking this, would I say, not really arbitrary, but this powerful, position is that it's subject to the confirmation of the Senate. So in a way, that also checks the powers of the president, making it subject to the confirmation of the Senate. I agree with you. He who plays the piper detects the tune. But then again, who even gives the piper to the? Who even gives the fruits to the piper? The legislation. It's the institution that gave the piper to the fruits to the piper. So let's go back home. Chicken or egg? Which one first? So yeah, that's my response.
Okay, so final question. I keep seeing hands raised. Please. Okay, let's just take this last from Nuruddin.
Hello, everyone. Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Nuruddin.
Hello?
I can hear you, Nuruddin. Can you hear me?
Hello, can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Okay. My question goes like this. How and when is the restructuring of constitution need to be restructured in a particular country? Is that clear?
Can you take that again?
How and
No,
when
can you take that again?
I say, how and when is the restructuring of constitution need to be restructured in a particular country? Restructuring.
Okay, your network has been affected. So let's just go on and take the questions in the chat box.
Okay.
So one question, according to the Constitution, is there a limit to freedom of speech and expression? To rephrase, the person is asking if there's a limit to what one ought to say and what we ought not to say. And should we use our freedom of speech or expression to infringe on one another's rights? Well, okay.
I love that question.
I don't know if I can reach this. Okay, you can go ahead and answer this.
My network.
Yeah. Okay, so I'll just answer the question. Yes, absolutely. Yes, there is a link to your rights and rights that are given to you by the Constitution. So it's a saying that your right stops where another person's right starts. Right. So rights are not, they're not, what's the word? They're not limitless, So at the point where another person starts having the right, yours stops. So you have a freedom of expression, but you're not going to express and then defame or make libelous comments about someone else, or even put out words of treason. Obviously, the state still has to be preserved, right? You're not going to, it also has to be in the confines of what is acceptable as expression in that state. Right, you're not going to go on air to make libelous comments or defame another person's character or say things that are untrue or say things that you are not factual. So these are some of the things that curb your rights as a person. Your rights are only your rights to the extent that it does not infringe on another person's right, even to freedom of movement. If you move into my house, then you're now trespassing. If you move into my property, I can sue you or get you arrested or trespassing. So obviously you can move, but then your movement is subject to public, access or public roads or public spaces. You can't then move into other places and say you have freedom of movement, or again with protest, freedom of association. You can have your association, you can have your political rallies, or if you start vandalizing, obstructing the road or not letting other people have access to their own rights, like right of way and right of access and all of that, then your freedom then ends. So, like I said earlier, it is then our obligation to better equip ourselves with what our rights are, first of all, but then what are the limitations to our rights? Because when we participate, we're then in a better position to say, oh, yeah, you can't go there, you can't stand there, you can't loiter there. That's probably someone's private residence, or you can't sit on someone's car because that's trespassing or that's vandalization. We are better informed as to the limitations of our rights. So yes, that's a very good question. Thank you.
Okay. All right. I see about two more questions, but I would relate one with the other. So one question is on the types of constitution. I think that's like a government question, the types of constitution, and he or she would like to know the type of constitution we are practicing on the citizens, and to know if truly what we are practicing, and to know if truly this is what we are practicing, and if not, what is your advice? So the question is, what are the types of constitutions that exist, the type that we are practicing, and the effect on the citizens? And I would like to add to that question, I think that was Nuradin's question rephrased. It says, how and when can a constitution be changed in a country? So I just decided to marry those two questions together. The first says the types of constitution that may exist and the type that we are practicing and the effect on citizens. And then the follow-up question is, how and when can the constitution be changed? Did you get that? Okay.
Yes, I got the question. So so the process of amending our constitution, that's the 1999 constitution, which we have in Nigeria, is contained in section 9 of the constitution. So it's spelled out. There's like a whole process. It has to be a majority, that votes for the amendment. There's stringent processes, right? So you have to follow it really, really in a very strict way, right? So I think it's four-fifth majority of all the members of the House must vote for its alteration. And then it also requires that it's approved by the House of Assembly, or if it's a state, right? So it's a lot of lobbying and a lot of canvassing for push. But I'd advise you to just go through section 9 of the Constitution. It properly states how and how the procedure is for amendments. Now to the second question about the types of constitution, I would say that there are different classifications. There are different classifications you can use. There's written and unwritten constitution. There's the codified one and the uncodified one. There's the monarchy constitution and the republican one. There's the presidential one and the parliamentary one. We obviously have a presidential written constitution. We have the federal and unitary constitution. We operate a federal. So kind of classification that you are looking at. Nigeria operates a federal system, and by federal system, it means that there's a central power. States also have autonomy in certain states. So you have things like in the exclusive list. In the exclusive list, that means it's only the federal government that can legislate on it. And then we have things that are in the what they call it, it's
concurrent.
Concurrent, exactly. We have things that are in the concurrent list. I mean, both the federal and the state government can legislate on it. Then we have things as procedural list. I think that's what's called procedural list. Yeah, so these are all government questions, like Adeshola said. Nigeria has a federal constitution. So that also implies a lot of things. It means that there's a federal state and then the states also have. So to the point about the child, the child issue, right? So for children, the state adjudicates that. So that's why you have some states in Nigeria having autonomy over what exactly they accept in their state, what exactly they ratify into their laws. You have child right acts of child right law of different states, because when it comes to child, the state has activity deciding on what is actually concrete, but the state also has some sort of leverage to educate on what they accept into their laws. As an advice, I don't know what you want me to say. I think a federal system is great. The issue is, I don't think that the issue is for our system of government. The only issue is in the implementation of things. I think we have a wonderful system of government. It's the skill. It encourages democracy. The state has some kind of power, is not that centralized. There is concurrence, and there's also things that the state can also educate, which I think, but I think that the issue now comes to the character of people that we put up there to adjudicate on this constitution.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So 2 final questions which can be taken together before we call it a day. Someone asked that, is it the sole responsibility of citizens to guard these rights, or that of the government and its agencies? And the second question is, out of the 3 arms of government, which one is most superior? For a more effective judiciary, do you think the judiciary should be above the others to ensure the enforcement of these human rights or constitutional rights? So let me take the first again. The person says, is it the sole responsibility of the citizens to guard their rights, or that of the government and its agencies? And then secondly, out of the 3 arms of government, which is most superior? Do you think that the judiciary should be above the others for a more effective, for effectiveness to ensure enforcement of human rights, of the constitutional rights as guaranteed?
So I think these are questions. I'm happy because it means that you guys are listening and you're also thinking really well. So kudos to you. I love this question. The first question, or the second question about the judiciary, I don't think that any of the other. What is necessary is proper checks and balances. That's actually what the rule of law provides for. Proper. So if you put one above the other, then you are going against the principle of the rule of law. What is actually essential? Proper checks and balances. That means that, first of all, the judiciary should be independent, not above, independent. Why should they be independent? Because they are the ones that adjudicate on the law. They are the ones that interpret the law. They're the ones that decide on how best to adjudicate on that, to translate that law into reality. So they need to be independent, because if someone is advising or if someone is influencing the interpretation of the law, then that means that person is an upper hand. Because again, the legislature, they have their power to prepare these laws. But if the judiciary decides on something a particular way and it gets to say the Supreme Court, that's the precedent that you have set now. All of that things, all of that occurrences that happen in line with that precedent has to follow. Because there's a concept of precedence in the judiciary, right? That if you do for one, you have to do for the other. That's also the predictable nature of the judiciary. It has to be predictable. So if person A steals something with a gun, points a gun at you, and then steals something, that's armed robbery. What does armed robbery say? It's a felony. You need to go to the police to jail. Right? Now, if someone else comes and then does the same thing, you can't then say, oh, he's light skinned, he should not go to jail, or he should just get permission. That's the predictability. So it needs to be independent, granted, but it cannot be superior, because each of these arms of government, they have a role to play, and they need to be properly checked and balanced by each other. So the powers of the president are curbed or tempered by the powers of the legislature. So, for instance, the question that the person asked earlier about why he's the one appointing the INEC person, the state sort of confirms that appointment, right? So the state can decide not to confirm that appointment. Do you get? But the president is scoring favor, or someone in the Senate is scoring favors from the president, or perhaps the people in the Senate are being appointed by the president from his village, or they are his relatives. That also affects his judgment, or affects his judgment on the things that he does. The thing that needs to be done is to have proper checks and balances, not for one to be superior to the other. What was the first question?
That had to do with safeguarding the rights. Is it the sole responsibility of citizens or that of the government?
Awesome. So when we say citizens, when you separate citizens from government, it begs the question, at what point do you stop being a citizen? So to the person asking that question, if you were to be elected to a place of power, right? Do you stop being a citizen? Are you now the government? Because when you say government, we are all the government, because we are all involved in governance. There shouldn't be any separation in your mind as to, oh, we're just citizens and these are the government. So that first of all is a flaw in our thinking, that, oh, we've separated ourselves as, oh, these are the citizens, these are the government people, and these are the people in power. No, we are all, is a collaborative effort. We all have our roles to play. First of all, in deciding who even gives the mandates to safeguard these rights, to interpret these rights, to create these rights, right? Even after you've given them the mandate, your role doesn't stop there. You continue to watch over it. The Bible says, watch over your word until it comes to pass. It's also what we're supposed to do. We watch over whoever is there, that, oh, the thing you were saying when you were here with us, It's exactly what we're doing there. And at any point when you stop doing what you said you were going to do, we will call you out and make sure you align, or we replace you. You know, we are more active in within the confines of our rights. Like, we are more actively exerting our rights than just being bystanders and saying, oh, these laws are there, we can't do anything about it. The people that you put into power, lobby them, tell them, oh, this is an arbitrary position. Why is this here? This needs to be changed. You need to sponsor a bill that advises to change this and this. You need to sponsor a bill that, you know, talks about doing the roads in our local government. You know, you need to, we engage them. We always put fire, even if we are in the opposition. It doesn't stop. It's everybody's role. It's everybody's role. But then again, the institutions that we have to execute is, first of all, in my opinion, is first of all flawed, because there's just such a sense of hopelessness when things actually happen. You know, even as a lawyer, I'm always like overwhelmed when I try to advise people, because they end up having to spend more than they would have if they just let go, which is really, really bad. Our systems, our institutions need to be more active and more, you know, empowered to support the people. The institutions are not for the 1% of the society, they are for all. It's for the common man. That's why people are migrating to societies where systems are actually supporting the people, not systems working against the people, in a sense. So that's what I would say. It's everyone's collaborative responsibility, but then we need to push as well for our institutions to be better managed and better established to support these rights, right? So you buy something off of Instagram, what organization, what sort of body is there to ensure that these things that you bought were what was sold? And if it wasn't what was sold, can you have a quick redress? Can it be addressed quickly? You know, you sold something that is not fit for purpose under the Sales Goods Act, Sales of Goods Act. If you sell something that is not fit for purpose, I have a right to return it. But I not you have a refund policy. If you sell something that's not fit for purpose, I should have a right to redress immediately. That's a system that works. You know, that the common man is not left to their own devices when something happens, right? So that would be my response to that.
Right. All right. Wow. Yes, I think we have had a robust, I must say, very enriching. That was the word I was looking for at the beginning and start of this program. I was hoping that we would have an enriching session. And I must say that it has indeed been insightful, enriching. Feels like the conversation should keep going. We should have more questions, but hey, we have to round off. So on this note, please let's appreciate Uchechi for giving of herself, being here, sharing her knowledge, taking on the questions in the graceful manner she has done. Thank you so much, Uchechi, on behalf of the Electoral College. We thank you, Deputy Director, Lagos State. You're one of us, and you have indeed done justice to this topic today. Thank you so much. Thank you, members of the 10th cohort. Yes, we continue next week, Friday. Please keep up with our assignments. The debates are coming up pretty soon so that we basically keep learning in practice what we are being taught during the weekends. Thank you. And it's bye-bye from me if there are no questions or announcements from the head of Politeracy. Thank you. And
thank you, guys.